G'day, short video to show my attempt at replacing a clutch and flywheel in a Nissan Navara 2010 D40, the 2.5 four-wheel drive version. The clutch and flywheel I'm going to use is from Blue Steel down in Melbourne. It's part of their Survivor Series range. The reason we're doing the change is because the clutch is starting to slip, and for me the annoyance of what I think is coming from clunking in the dual mass flywheel. I think it started to fail. We'll find out when we take it off though. I might need to point out that I'm not a mechanic by trade, so we might have some tools thrown around the shed. There's probably 1,000 ways we can do this video, so here's my way of doing it. If any of it helps you, awesome. Anyway, let's get into it. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is just remove those wires from the side of the gearbox, and also take out the sensor just up in here that goes for the crank. Alright, so what we're going to do next is take out the tail shaft and also undo the front drive shaft as well. Alright, next thing you've got to do is take the gear knob out of the gearbox. So we'll come in. Alright, the next bit we are going to do is to undo the gearbox to crossmember bolts. So we'll undo these. A quick update. I'm actually just loosening off this bracket that holds some line in it. Okay, see, you can see the line. Because when I take the cross member out, I don't want that to bend down. So just before we undo the cross member from up in here, we've now put the weight on the back of the gearbox, and yeah, we'll give it a crack. Okay, at this point, the cross member's out, and they were fun to get out, by the way. So now we'll go and take out the gearbox bolts. Alright, now that we've got all the bolts out of the gearbox, between engine and gearbox, basically going to try and lower gearbox a little and get it to come off the engine. Alright, so as you can see, the box is away from the engine now. Had to do one little extra thing, which was undo the rear part of the exhaust, so the muffler and a little bit back, just to get a little bit of extra leeway to get the gearbox out. I'm going to try and do the flywheel and clutch on the car with the gearbox still where it is, up in the air. And just as I was going to take the flywheel off, I thought, well, I've got to find something to lock it off with, so I just made up this dodgy 90-degree bend, just enough to just put it back in with a gearbox bolt. Actually, that was a bolt off the slave master cylinder, just here. And yep, groove some teeth in it, and yeah, we'll see. That's going to lock the flywheel off, so you can undo the bolts. Alright, so we've got the clutch out, and as you can see, it's had a little bit of a hard time. So that heat soak there. The plate, it's got a massive sign of wear through here, and all the markers, like you can still see the markers somewhat, but it's pretty much see you later, it's done. Alright, so this is the old clutch plate. It's got around about 5.8 mil left on it. We'll check out the new plate, see what the difference is. Around about 8 mil. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to undo the flywheel. We're going to need a special one of these. It's the Torx 55 size head, and it'll go in there. One thing to note is the position of the marker for the flywheel will have to go on the same position, so that you know, the sensors read and you don't get faults and have to do it all again. Thai built car, my Navara. Looks to me like it says Australia #1. So I've just taken the flywheel out, and as suspected, it's gone. Over here we do have our locating pin on the back of the new one, which will be just here, and then we'll line that up with what I'll show you on the car. Alright, what we're going to do now is we are going to replace this thrust bearing in here for good measure. It's quite simple to take off. Push the rubber shoe in and pop it off the back, and then literally just slide the entire mechanism off like that. Alright, what we're going to do is we are going to swap this bearing out for the new one. The easy way to do it is to firstly take it off, which is basically just undoing it, popping this little clip off like this, and then we have to take the center off the actual bearing itself. So if you've got a bench vise or something like that, you're not tightening it up. Just put it in, find a socket of sorts that is roughly the size of that center section, and say hello. Alright, we are at the halfway mark. What we're going to do now is put the flywheel back on, and we have to get that little hole there aligned with the dowel that comes out of the back of the crankshaft. Looks like she is on. Alright, what we're going to do now is we are going to torque up these Torx screws, put some Loctite on them, and we'll do the Blue Steel recommended 95 Newton meters on the torque bolts. We are going to fit the clutch itself, the clutch plate. First thing we'll do is check that it fits on the spline, and it does. So then when we fit it, we'll put the thick side towards the gearbox, and we will throw this in using an aligning tool, and that will help us sort this out. Alright, now it's time to do up the clutch cover, and we're going to torque these up to 15 Newton meters first in a crisscross pattern, and then after that we'll come back around again and do it to the Blue Steel recommended 30 Newton meters. So we're at a point now where we're just going to start putting it all back together. I think the hardest part will be trying to align the spline out of the gearbox into the clutch. So we'll see how that goes, and I'll give you a heads up. Alright, so car is done. The install went a lot smoother than taking the gearbox out. Maybe I should tell you a couple of specialty tools that we sort of use to do it to make it easier. So the first one is grabbing an alignment tool, something like this. That was pretty cool. You'll need a T55 torque, which is something like this. It's not coming in focus, but a T55. Also, to torque them up, something like a torque wrench, and also, I'm unsure if you can buy these or not, but I just sort of made one. This little bit of kit here, basically that just sort of sits on one of the gearbox bolts, and those grooves go in between where the flywheel teeth are. Anyway, so that was pretty cool. That allowed me to sort of do the torquing of the bolts without having to make it too hard for myself. When we did the job, I decided to sort of keep the box up in the air instead of dropping it down and removing it right away. So basically, removing it away from the engine and then moving it back, there was probably 150 millimeters of play to do all the work. It was okay, you could do that. The thing with that is I had to drop the exhaust It was only 5 or 6 bolts, and that lowered it enough so that you could get the gearbox to come back a little bit and do the work there. Drivability with the new clutch. First thing I noticed was when I put my foot on the clutch pedal, found the friction point down near the firewall, as opposed to right at the end of the actual pedal itself, which is fantastic. The other thing I noticed with the Blue Steel clutch, even though it is a heavy duty clutch, I expected to get a massive leg workout. However, the pressure needed to push in that clutch pedal is far less than the factory one that was in there. So there are two differences, main differences I noticed. Actually driving, there is a little bit of vibration, but only noticeable on very low revs. So it's just sort of up to 1500 RPM. I wouldn't call it a huge issue at all. It's the slightest bit of vibration. It's not huge at all. And something you wouldn't even notice if you kept it out of that range anyway for most of the part. So overall, at this stage, pretty happy with how it's gone. I hope the video has possibly shed a little bit of the extra light for you to maybe do it if you wanted to do it. Just remember, like I said at the start, I'm not a mechanic by trade. This was definitely done in my garage over a weekend. You know, we were done by lunchtime Sunday. So yeah, if you can take any tips out of this, awesome. See ya.